classic of poetry, also known as the Book of Songs or the Book of Odes or the Shi Jing in the original, is a anthology, and the background of this book comes to us a little bit shady, as anything in the ancient era is. The one legend has it that Confucius himself edited it. It was originally a collection of thousands of poems, and he got it down to a taut 305. There are a number of different stories about how it came together, what the motivation was, what the effects have been over the years. It's a very old work. Some of it is clearly from even before it was written. They were collected from different traditions. Sometimes you would have common folk stories being told in rather elaborate and educated and cultured language, which gives you a sense of, well, okay, there's some layers here, some stratification in the evolution of this story, or this poem, this art, that makes it very hard to date. Generally speaking, the prevailing wisdom tells us that it does, as a collection, predate the Confucian era, and then over the generations following Confucius, when Confucius became Confucius, it was incorporated into the great tradition of the five classic Confucian texts, and it is used generally as a representation of the culture, as a unifying force within the culture to teach people, each succeeding generation, the wisdom of the ages, which for them meant how to be a good citizen, which is a prevailing concern of Confucius. How to be a good person in general, how to be a good citizen to your fellow man, how to be a good citizen to the state. All of these notions are bound up in this series of very short lyric poems that present an image of a world of harmony. And when things are disharmonious, there is a suggestion that, well, this is because something is sort of out of whack, and this is how you should appreciate it. So it's a suggestion in certain respects. There's a little bit of an owner's manual to this. If things get out of joint, if something seems to not be in perfect harmony, then you need to identify it, and you need to try and fix it. And the way to identify problems in the social realm, and that's what Confucius and that tradition tends to be very concerned with, the way to identify that easily and readily is to have a fine-tuned perception of these problems. And the way you fine-tune your perception is through reading, scholarship, thinking about things, through a sharpening of the mind in an academic or artistic setting, so that when it engages with similar problems in a worldly realm, then it has mechanisms for going about it. You've essentially trained yourself to solve a problem. And so the poems are a remarkably diverse and often quite opaque way to sharpen your mind. There are very few solid answers in any of them. You can spend a lifetime, and people do, pondering them, always trying to sharpen your faculties against the whetstone of art. And so there is that very obvious utilitarian goal here of these poems are meant to do something. But within that, there is remarkable artistry, remarkable beauty. Just because something is useful doesn't mean it can't just take your breath away with its wonder. And a lot of these short poems convey that. They pack that wallop. A lot of them have to do with simply how to deal with your fellow man, how to deal with the common problems of everyday life, how to deal with the common problems of the heart, and feelings of loneliness, feelings of resentment, feelings of frustration. These come up again and again and again. But they take some dwelling on. You can't just read it and just get it. You need to sort of break it down a little. The first poem in the collection, and translations vary remarkably from one to the other. The first poem is generally called Fishhawk. The fishhawks sing guan guan on sandbars in the stream, gentle maiden, pure and fair, fit pair for a prince. Watercress grows here and there, right and left we gather it, gentle maiden, pure and fair, wanting, waking, and asleep. Wanting, sought her, had her not, waking, sleeping, thought of her. On and on he thought of her, he tossed from one side to another. Watercress grows here and there, right and left we pull it. Gentle maiden, pure and fair, with harps we bring her company. Watercress grows here and there, right and left we pick it out. Gentle maiden, pure and fair, with bells and drums do her delight. What is going on there? Well, this is where the exercise kicks in. You have to start to notice things. You have to start to get in and dig it out. Well, the first thing that you notice is that it is kind of repetitious. You get an image of nature. The fishhawks sing guan guan on sandbars in the stream. And then the line, gentle maiden, pure and fair, fit pair for a prince. Okay, so that's interesting. An image of nature, an image of a young woman who is a fit pair, who is a fit princess, essentially, who is a fit match for a prince. Interesting. Watercress grows here and there, right and left we gather it. Gentle maiden, pure and fair, wanted, waking, and asleep. Okay, now again we get another image of nature. This time watercress grows here and there, right and left we gather it. Who is we in this? Gentle maiden, pure and fair, wanted, waking, and asleep. So now this is something different. This is no longer saying that is just a pretty girl. This is now desire. This is somebody who is tossing and turning perhaps at night, because the image of that character, of that girl, is inspiring some thoughts and then dwelling on that. And notice how the third stanza brings us into that sense of frustrated desire and the tossing and turning, and it does somewhat mirror the effect of having a frustrated night's sleep, when your mind just keeps going, you just can't sleep. Wanted, wanting, sought her, had her not, waking, sleeping, thought of her. On and on he thought of her, he tossed from one side to another. Those first two lines give you a mimetic reconstruction of not being able to sleep because your mind is tortured by desire and that sense of frustration. Until that the second pairing, the second two lines, gives you a perspective, on and on. He thought of her. He tossed from one side to another. So that's a third party in this. So the we that we saw earlier is independent, apparently, of this he. He is now quite tortured with this image. Watercress grows here and there, right and left. We pull it. You get a sense of picking something. Gentle maiden, pure and fair, with harps we bring her company. With harps are what generally gets played perhaps at a wedding. Watercress grows here and there, right and left. We pick it out. Gentle maiden, pure and fair, with bells and drums, do her delight. Do her delight. With bells and drums, that's much more thunderous, let's say, more cacophonous than a harp. Much less gentle. You get a sense of it being a kind of consummation. I'm going to let you dwell on what kind of consummation that can be. It can be a wedding, could be something else. There is a sense of obsession, however, that leads to this sense of desire that torments, that brings you to, and the whole notion of this perfect image is quite haunting, that he just can't let go. Whoever he is, you get the sense of it being a prince. Now, the backstory to this supposedly is that this girl is being picked out for a prince, and there is an ambiguous relationship between the women doing the picking and the prince himself and the new girl being adopted in a polygamous imperial household, perhaps. Older wives, previous wives, picking the new wife? Possibly. There's so much uncertainty there. You're invited in to speculate, to try and draw some conclusions, but the prevailing notion is that it is a match of nature, these natural images, the interaction with nature, picking, plucking, listening, being in nature, and the natural consequence of picking a young girl for the prince, of any new romantic love, let's say, being a natural process. Nature and love tied together with art and poetry. And there is this terrific sensuality about the poems that is really evocative, and you can read it so many different ways. A lot of nature imagery becomes sexualized, particularly in fruits, and you can go crazy with that. Peach tree soft and tender, how your blossoms glow. The bride is going to her home, she well befits this house. Peach tree soft and tender, plump the ripening fruit. The bride is going to her home, she well befits this house. Peach tree soft and tender, its leaves spread thick and full. The bride is going to her home, she well befits these folk. Again, you have repetition, and then at the end, a little bit of a twist. She well befits this house, then she well befits these folk, the people within it, within the house. She's getting to know her new family, perhaps. She is a bride. She is going to her husband's home, which will become her home, and it is appropriate. She well befits the house, and then the people within. She gets to know them. It's no longer just the house, it's the people within. And this is all a natural a natural process. So the peach tree, soft and tender, which seems very gentle. A peach is also generally a fairly sexualized fruit, so you can speculate down that route. But it is a sense that, well, it's natural that she's going to go and it will become more familiar. It will start out as just a house, but it will become the people. It will grow on her, growing being a natural tendency. The notion of picking a bride and a marriage and the imperatives of that, the social imperatives of marriage, and the warnings and problems that can arise in that process pop up from time to time. Plums are falling, 7 are the fruits, many men want me, let me have a fine one. Plums are falling, 3 are the fruits, many men want me, let me have a steady one. Plums are falling, catch them in a basket, many men want me, let me be the bride of one. Well, here it seems to be a cautionary tale. Plums are falling, plums are falling, plums are falling. Okay, you know, hey, nature, plums, another fairly sexualized fruit. 7 are the fruits, so great abundance. Then 3 are the fruits. Well, it's getting a little skimpier. And then catch them in a basket. Well, you know, you can't catch too many at once if you've just got like a basket and you're underneath trying to catch it. So I would say it's becoming much more sporadic at that point. They're falling sporadically. Much skimpier. But many men want me. So this is a girl writing, a young woman. Let me have a fine one. And here, you know, this is a very girlish thing to think. You know, every girl wants her Prince Charming, and he better be Prince Charming because a young girl's standards are high. When you are young, you expect an awful lot from the world, and why start humbly? Shoot for the stars. But then, as the resources start to diminish, 3 are the fruits. Well, you know, it's not quite as fruitful as I used to be. Many men want me, let me have a steady one. Well, here you get somebody who's willing to say, well, you know, oh, wealth and good looks and all of that stuff, well, that's fine, but, you know, what really matters is I have a steady, somebody who's sturdy and dependable. You know, that's taking it down a notch in your aspirations, perhaps. And then, of course, the last one, let me be the bride of one. So now it doesn't even matter what the characteristics are. It's let me be the bride of one. I don't really care as long as he's got a heartbeat. It's more about the bride at that point. Now you can say that this is a progression of, you know, her becoming more selfish or more self-involved, or recognizing herself, or recognizing her precarious nature. It could be a declaration of the vulnerability of women. I'm not so sure about that. It could be though, because they are naturally vulnerable to this, and you know, this has been a somewhat perennial problem. Women get older and they are less desirable, they are less fertile, literally, and so they can be less picky. So here you have a little poem as a warning, perhaps, telling, pointing out that, well, when you have to get married, don't start out too picky. You could end up alone. This is the kind of advice that you give to an individual about the world around them. It's less about, you know, trying to inspire greatness in an individual than it is just trying to make sure the world goes through its, the world functions as peacefully and productively as possible. And this is what a government tends to want. I point out that this is used as a Confucian book. Confucius generally very concerned with how government functions, how society functions, and is less concerned with the hopes and dreams of the individual than he is with just making sure that everybody has their role in society and society goes along peacefully. Society, nature, and the individual within them all function together doing what they have to do. This is excuse me. This is a very organic understanding of society. It's seeing society as an outgrowth of nature, that it's all the same thing, which is a subtle distinction, but it's really a cornerstone of Confucian thought. In Boat of Cyprus, you get a sense of frustration, of narrator being somewhat of an outsider. There is a rebelliousness to it. You know, this heart of mine is no mirror; it cannot take it all in. Yes, I do have brothers, but brothers will not be my stay. I went and told them of my grief and met only with their rage. A sense of rejection. He doesn't feel like he fits in society. And you get this irritation that can be seen as independence or just fruitless rebelliousness. My heart is uneasy and restless. I am reproached by little men. Many are the woes I've met and taken slights more than a few. I think on it in the quiet and waking pound my breast. All right, you know, when you're alone, you're frustrated and embittered, and there's nothing productive coming out of that. Oh, sun and you, moon, or nature, why do you each grow dim in turn? These time passing. These troubles of the heart are like unwashed clothes. I think on it in the quiet. I cannot spread wings to fly away. Well, nobody wants him to fly away. He just needs to adopt, perhaps, the role of constructive members of society. Out of the harmony of nature, he is an outcast. And his body and soul together are rebelling against the harmony of nature. There's no reason for it within the poem. His inner life is very much at odds with the surrounding society and nature, and it's unproductive. These troubles in his heart are like unwashed clothes. So the poem seems to be suggesting, take them off and wash them. Strip yourself of all of this frustration, of all of this aggravation, and just give in to your role in nature, which is your role in society. Meaning, shut up, sit down, do your work, and life will work out. It's a hard lesson to tell somebody who is naturally rebellious. It's a frustrating lesson for somebody who is egotistical, without that having good or bad connotations. But it's a frustrating lesson for somebody who is egotistical to try and learn, because they don't want to know. They don't want to be told that they should just give in. But for an orderly, functioning society, you got to have that. Not everybody can express themselves at all times. Another loved one. She cast a quince to me, a costly garnet I returned. It was no equal return, but by this love will last. She cast a peach to me, costly opal I returned. It was no equal return, but by this love will last. She cast a plum to me, a costly ruby I returned. It was no equal return, but by this love will last. Well, you can read this a couple of different ways. There's a certain nonchalance about the way this girl, the she, is casting her the fruit at this guy. You can see her as being a little bit flippant or manipulative or insincere in that action, but he keeps paying for it, and it goes on. There's no resolution, there's no change, there's no development. So you get a sense of maybe this is a cautionary tale about throwing gifts at an ideal, at a goal. Perhaps a girl, but it can, by extrapolation, go in a number of other directions, but not getting any return, but at least biding some time. Maybe that's the point. Maybe this is just their natural rhythm that they're supposed to go into. It doesn't really make that clear. Maybe this is the way the world, in a political sense. Maybe sometimes you just want to go through the motions and you can't help it if it doesn't necessarily develop. But that whole time it is still fruitful relationship. They seem to be enjoying one another. It was no equal return. That's the money, that's the jewelry for the fruit. He still feels like he's coming out ahead in this exchange. Maybe he is. It doesn't explain itself to you as a reader. It doesn't really lay out, this is what it means. You have to slow down and think about it. You have to dwell on it, meditate with it, sit with it, sleep with it. Let it become part of you. And in that process, the turning over of the thoughts makes you, I suppose, wise. And then you can go on using this knowledge and exercise that in other venues. The same personal example you can see in Zhangzi Please, where it seems to be a story of love, or of sorts of relations between a man and a woman. We'll get to that, but can have other applications, can be seen as a blueprint for thinking politically or on some other realm. The idea of an interaction between frustrated or conflicting parties. In it, Zhangzi Please, don't cross my village wall, don't break the windows planted there. It's not that I care so much for them, but I dread my father and mother. Zhangzi may be in my thoughts, but what my father and mother said, that too may be held in dread. So you get this image immediately of this girl begging this boy who is outside her window, or outside her wall at this point, who is like trying to come at her, and she's holding him off, saying, "Zhangzi, please, don't break the windows, the willows planted there." You know, he's somewhat boorish, and automatically your head goes to, well, is this guy coming to assault her? It seems like it could be that. It's not that I care so much for them, but I dread my mother and father. The sense of social outrage. She's less concerned, it seems, about what Zhangzi might be coming to do to her than she is about, well, what the neighbors might say to her mom and dad, and is it going to offend them, and will there be social pressures brought to bear? It's uncomfortable. There's also, you know, Zhangzi may be in my thoughts already. So she's admitting that, well, all right, you know, I'm thinking about you already, but don't come this way. So there's already a penetrative act been performed, let's say. He has entered her thoughts, if not her property or her body at this point. It's enormous tension in just that one short stanza at the beginning. But it develops because he keeps crossing boundaries. Let's say, Zhangzi, please don't break my fence, don't break the mulberries planted there. It's not that I care so much for them, but I dread my brothers. More social pressure. Zhangzi may be in my thoughts, but what my brothers said, that too may be held in dread. So it's the social, it's the family. All of these things are bearing down, but Zhangzi is supposedly getting closer. He's inside the wall now. Now he's up at the fence. Zhangzi, please don't cross into my garden. And you can take garden wherever you want it. But don't break the sandalwood planted there. He's boorishly coming in. He's charging. This is a penetrative act. This is, it can very easily be read as a rape, or a rape about to happen. He is breaking and entering here, it seems. But I dread others will talk much. This is the concern, the social, the social shame of it. When people talk too much, that too may be held in dread. There is that sense of, fear and desperation. But it can be read a number of different ways. You can read it, I would argue, on a political realm, where you're saying that, okay, these are two people who are learning to respect boundaries. Zhangzi's problem is that he keeps breaking through them. And what are your concerns? Well, there are concerns. When you see somebody coming at you, you need to be aware of this, and you need to be thinking of what? Well, the social pressures within your society, perhaps. You need to be thinking about the people you are attacked to. You might personally not feel so offended by this culture or this opponent of some sort coming at you, but other people might. And these are considerations you need to have, let's say, as a political or military leader. All of this is studied by people to work in government as political and military leaders. So there is that very simple extrapolation that this could be about how to, let's say, diffuse a war before it happens, or how to deal with an aggressor nation or tribe. But I would say it leaves another reading open too, where the narrator isn't necessarily the victim that you might think. If you just tweak the language just a little bit, the reading of the language, it could be, Zhangzi, please, please. And there's that repetition that can be read a couple of different ways. Is please a rebuke or an invitation? Don't cross my wall. Is that a tease? What is the power dynamic here? It's unclear. You can read it on this level if you just import just a tad bit of irony to it and see that maybe there is a repressed desire acting here. It's not all just sincere pleading. It's somebody who, oh no, you're coming to get me. It's almost a seduction in a way. Maybe that tone invites the aggressor. It's uncertain. Maybe this is a cautionary tale about not being absolutely clear. You can read this so many different ways, on a personal level, on a political level, on just a social level. There's a lot going on here that is uncomfortable to consider, but is significant. Huge Rat. You gotta love a title like that. Huge Rat is, well, it's a fairly simple little allegory, I guess you could say. The huge rat is a symbol. This huge rat is equated to, well, the huge rat is always eating the millet, eating the wheat, eating the sprouts forever and ever. It's repetitious again. But the narrator responds to that. Huge rat, eat my millet no more. For 3 years I've fed you, yet you pay me no heed. You don't pay attention to me. I swear that I will leave you and go to a happier land, a happy place, and there I will find my place. So if you look at it politically, the huge rat could be a king or an emperor who taxes his people too much. And if you tax them too much, they will get frustrated and they will get up and leave. I swear I will leave you. That is repeated. That is always the threat. Not that I'm going to, that I'm going to strike back at you or anything. I'm just going to get up and leave. And for the most part, political leaders, emperors, do not want their people to leave. Because if you are a leader with no one following, you are not a leader for long. For 3 years I have fed you and you show no gratitude. This sense of the interdependence of these two characters, the rat, if it is an emperor or a king or a political leader of some sort, you need to appreciate the sacrifices that people do, that people make for you. You need to see that relationship as somewhat organic and mutual. It can't just be a parasite. You can't just take and take and take and not provide anything in return. So again, you can read this a couple of different ways in terms of, well, a husband and wife. Let's say the husband is a tyrant and doesn't appreciate the wife. Well, here's something for you. You recognize this dynamic. But the same thing on a political level. If a king or a government official just takes ordinary farmers for granted, you're not going to be king of much for very long. It's a voice of a farmer warning the emperor, which is in itself is somewhat radical, if it wasn't for the fact that it's the government class, it's Confucius and those who advise the emperors, it's the intellectuals who are putting these words in the mouths of farmers to advise the emperors, who hire basically Confucius and the other intellectuals to tell them to tell them how to teach them. So it's a very complicated little relationship there, and it's not necessarily you're getting a real voice of the people here. But you do get, like I said before, a sense that, well, some of these little anecdotes, little tales, sort of like Aesop's fables, pre-existed their being written down. They just existed out there in the folk culture. So that way they might be. And other people have done studies of this, and we don't need to go into any great detail. But that might be a sign that they are, organic in their way, genuine in their way. And it's only later on that they start to get shaped a little by the intellectual class and by the political class. Sheep or the Folk is a lovely little tribute to organized agriculture, which again is a very governmental type thing. It's about the mythical beginnings of agriculture and how it is refined and practiced, and how religion comes and supports the practice, and it creates a sense of technology and folk culture and religion and society all organic together and producing a healthy world. And this is a Confucian vision. This is a vision of a well-functioning society that has a proper and judicious balance between nature, between the individual, between the society, all together. And art is part of that. the great preface is the other great element within this, where essentially the authors and the editors just lay out how to read the poems and the idea, and they go about the practice of interpretation within that, and a lot of them have to do with footnotey stuff about the emperors that we don't really need to know. But the important point is that within the artistic work itself is an expression of the importance of interpretation, and the idea that we need to understand how to read these poems, and that reading and interpreting them is the whole point of them. Thus, the affairs of a single state rooted in the experience of a single person are called thing. The affairs of a single state rooted in the affairs of a single person. So the individual is a stand-in for the entire state. It is both representative of and constituent of. It is part of a whole, and it is an individual. It is all tied together. And you can't separate any of it, really. It's all about thinking about it on those multiple levels, interpreting it on those multiple levels, on the individual level, on the social level, on the global level, on the natural level, cosmological level. All of it works together through the act of organizing it in your mind. And by organizing it in your mind, you discipline your mind so that you can see the patterns that art presents. You can see those patterns in the world itself, because truly great art, truly great literature, truly great philosophy will mirror the patterns of the world. And if you want to be a wise person in the world, a wise emperor, if you will, you need to study the wisdom of art. You need to sharpen your mind with poetry before you can use it to cut through the problems that bedevil humankind now, then, and for all eternity.